Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. If you Google radicalization of youth, what you'll find is a slew of articles linking Muslims, converts, and radicalization. Today we are joined by Imam Yassine Dwyer, former chaplain with the Correctional Service of Canada, to help us unpack one of the pieces of the larger discussion on radicalization, Muslim converts. What is it that draws people to convert to Islam? What are the social challenges that Muslim converts face? Let's find out. Welcome to the show, Imam Yassine.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to touch on an interesting topic today, which I find interesting. Hopefully the viewers do as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences working with Muslim converts?
Yes, I can. I myself am a convert to Islam. I converted to Islam perhaps 20 to 21 years ago.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, and I have always found fraternity with those who have converted to Islam because we have very similar issues, similar concerns, similar struggles, with family, community, and even struggles with culture. One thing that I find with those who have converted to Islam is that there is the question of identity that's very, very important and sometimes can be very problematic. That as Muslims, we know that there's no such thing as an Islamic culture. Rather, there are Muslim cultures. And I myself am a Canadian. I was born in Canada, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Some call it Winterpeg, Manitoba. I was born there. My mother and father are from Jamaica. I am a Muslim, so I have a multiple of identities. Being a Muslim is not my only identity. So I find this really fascinating with many who convert to Islam, especially in Canada, in America, in Western countries, because we're going through this process of creating a Muslim Canadian or a Muslim American culture. We can't forget as well that those luminaries of the Islamic past, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Imam Ali, may God be pleased with all of them, they were all converts to Islam as well. So we need to reflect on this, and I've always been very, very interested in developing relationships with those who have converted to Islam.
Now, you talked about, obviously, you have a lot to add to the conversation as well, being a convert yourself, but I know that you've also worked in prisons, and I would imagine you've also worked with Muslim converts. I'm more interested in if you can talk a little bit about, we often hear, everybody says there are challenges that Muslim converts face, issues of identity, issues of integration, etc. But what does that really look like? And if you could also, I'm going to throw something more at you because it's just interesting. What about, I guess, female converts, and what does that conversation look like as well?
Yes, well, okay, let's start from the beginning. Yes, I do work in prison. You did ask me about prison, right?
I did.
Yes.
I think so.
I did work in a prison. I was a chaplain, and I dealt with many offenders who converted to Islam in prison.
Men and women.
Men and women. All of them saw within the religion of Islam a very profound and concise and complete answer to the questions that they have had, and perhaps they were able to see within Islam a means to live a very disciplined and meaningful life in a prison context, right? They were able to find freedom through submission and servitude to the Creator of the heavens and the earth. And the prison itself, I like to look upon it as, and I try to project to many of the brothers and sisters that I worked with, that prison is an extended khalwa, or an extended retreat, an extended opportunity to meditate, to reflect, and to actually speak to yourself. Right? We don't have the opportunity very often in the hustle and bustle of life to be able to actually speak to ourselves. And perhaps the reason we may not be intentional about speaking to ourselves is because we're afraid of the monster that's inside of us.
I don't know, how do you explain that to someone like me who hasn't been in prison, and I hope I don't ever go to prison, but how is that a place of meditation when you think of a stereotypical image of a prison, which, as far as I've seen and heard, is not pleasing? So how does that, where does that conversation, how did that idea come about, I guess, to you in that example?
Well, of course, out of darkness comes light.
That is true.
The light of the one illuminates every situation, every condition, every anxiety, every challenge. And prison itself is a microcosm of the world. The prison is only a smaller version of the bigger prison, which is what we call this dunya, this world. So the prison acts as a metaphor, really, for the real mission of Islam, which is to truly free yourself, to escape from yourself, to actually ask yourself those deep metaphysical questions that can actually help you achieve paradise, right, before you get to the real paradise, the paradise with a P.
So are you finding in your work, were you finding that the Muslim converts that were in prison, whatever their charges may be, men or women, that was sort of a turning point for them, and then when they came out of prison, it was different? Or like, what does that look like?
Well, everyone is different, and for many of them, at least those that I worked with very intimately, they were very interested in Islamic spirituality and interested in how Islamic spirituality can speak to their particular struggle, their particular offense, and how Islam can speak to helping them and facilitate this journey to becoming a complete human being. They found in Islam a very, very concise and practical means of doing that.
So did they also, you mentioned a little bit about the challenges that they faced. What are those challenges and how did they relate that, I guess, to the religion, just helping our viewers better understand?
Well, Islam is based on three particular dimensions. The first dimension has to do with doing. As Muslims, we pray, we fast. We have the pillars of Islam. Islam is also based upon knowing. We have the pillars of belief that revolve around believing in the oneness of God, believing in the angels, believing in all of the books, all of the prophets of God, believing in the last day, and believing in something called qadr, which means destiny. So whatever comes to us was never meant to pass us by, and whatever passes us by was never meant to come to us, right? So this is what we must know as Muslims. But there's a third dimension that we refer to as ihsan, I-H-S-A-N, or beautification, which means, as our Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, to worship God as though you see God, though you cannot see God, to know that God sees you. So Islam is about doing, it's about knowing, but it's also about this third dimension, which has to do with becoming or being something more than perhaps you think you can be.
So how can you be something more when you're dealing with, as a convert, you're dealing with a lot of challenges within the community, you know, especially in this day and age with all of the incidences that are happening, associations of Muslims and terrorism, and then even recently in the two incidences that happened in Ottawa and Quebec, the two individuals that were convicted, where there were always associations made that, you know, they were potentially converts of Islam or had associations with that. So yes. Where does that leave us and how does that fit into the bigger picture?
Well, of course, you know, what led up to those very tragic events are very multi-layered and perhaps cannot be, you know, collapsed into, you know, a few sentences or a few statements. But what I would say is this, that when it comes to the challenges that converts have, understand that God does not give any soul more than it can bear. And perhaps I can offer a very, very brief story that I've mentioned to many of the offenders when I was working with corrections, is that there was a grandmother who was sitting with her granddaughter and wanting to transmit some wisdom. And the elders are possessors of wisdom that they need to transmit to the young. And so she decided that she was going to offer her daughter, her granddaughter, some wisdom. So she placed a bowl of eggs, a bowl of carrots, and some coffee in 3 pots with water. And she brought these pots to a boil. And she took out, after they boiled for a few minutes, she took out the carrots, she took out the eggs, and she took out, poured out the coffee. And she asked her granddaughter, what do you see there? What do you see? And the granddaughter said, I see eggs, I see carrots, and I see coffee. the grandmother said, "What do you really see? What do you really see?" And the granddaughter said, I don't know. What is it, Grandma?" She said, "Well, with the eggs, they went into the boiling water, with a shell and very soft on the inside. And after being exposed to the water, the pressures of that boiling water, it became very hard. The inside became very, very hard. The carrots went into the boiling water, right? Very hard, but after being exposed to the boiling water, became, very, very soft. Right? The coffee beans now were placed in the water. The coffee beans were placed in the water, and rather than becoming soft, rather than becoming hard, the coffee beans consumed the water and turned the stress of the heat and the stress of the boil into something completely different and became beautiful, aromatic coffee. Right? So my advice to many of the brothers and sisters that I worked with is, to ask themselves, well, which one of these are you? Right? Are you the egg? Are you the carrots? Or are you coffee? And I remind all of them, as I remind all converts, as I always remind myself, to be coffee.
I agree. I'm not a convert, but I love coffee, so I'm going to go with you on that one.
Excellent. Very good.
Thank you very much, Imam Yassin. That's all the time we have. And we'll, I guess, hopefully see you soon again.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me.